Good morning, everyone from Quarantine Central. Let's talk about just a few quick things today, and then we'll get to some notes. First and foremost, there will be a bonus quiz between noon and 4 p.m. I will simply post the link right here. It's 6 questions. It's the questions we did the worst on the test. However many you get right, we'll just add those points right back into your test grade. So if you got 9 out of 18 on the test, and you get 6 out of 6, all of a sudden you've got a 15 out of 18 on the test. So stop by between noon and 4. Take that quiz. Won't take hardly any time. Study those questions. Study the review sheet again from Unit 1. Get known on those, and then it's gonna give you a couple of questions. Are gonna give you a little bit more time, but honestly, the questions we did the worst on were the ones that had the most time, which was interesting. So I've added a little bit of time to a couple of them. Take that between noon and 4. Get some points back on your test. Secondly, get out your Motel of Mysteries sheet where you drew a picture of what you think the thing looked like in the first column. You told me what it might be used for in the second column. We'll go over the answers real quick. Okay. Give you a second to do that and go. All right. So the whole point of the Motel of Mysteries was to act like a junior archaeologist, like somebody who's come across a site of artifacts and has to figure out what those artifacts are for. So you have an idea of what each one looked like. If you want to take a second and reread the account of coming across, the historical account of coming across the Motel of Mysteries, here's what the actual Motel of Mysteries looked like. Ready? Drum roll, please. And come on, where'd you go? Right? Come on. What? There we go. All right. So this is the Motel of Mysteries, and the whole point was to kind of trick you guys a little bit, but make you kind of think of like an archaeologist. So if an archaeologist didn't know that this was a motel bathroom with a person that died in the bathtub, they would make very different assumptions about each of the artifacts. So what you have here is the sarcophagus is a bathtub. The water trumpet is the back of the toilet that makes all the noise. Soap, a whiskey bottle, or some type of maybe shampoo bottle. Don't really know. The sacred paper is toilet paper. Okay. So check on your list and see how you did on drawing things. Did you draw a sarcophagus? Basically, did you draw a bathtub? Okay. Would it be easy? Now, a bathtub is a bathtub. This is a sarcophagus because there's a dead person in it. A sarcophagus holds a dead person. So obviously, if you look at this, you see the person died in the bathtub. But if you didn't know that, if you didn't know what this was, you would assume this was created to hold the dead body. And that's kind of what an artifact or an archaeologist has to do with their artifacts, is they got to figure out what's the deal with these things. So through the lens of knowing this stuff, we know this person was in the bathtub with the curtain drawn. And oh, by the way, all the stuff is here because the archaeologists put it there so they could study it. The archaeologists need an undisturbed area. So all this ropes and everything is put there so the archaeologists can keep everything and study it without disturbing it. So that's not really part of the artifact system. But we know they died in the bath. If you didn't know that, though, you would think that this was some type of important person because they have some type of headdress on, and they were buried, and their curtain was put on there so they were buried. And this would be some type of like a noisemaker to pronounce how awesome they were or whatever. Now we know, of course, it's a toilet, it's a bathtub, it's a dead person, it's soap. Maybe they were blind. Maybe that's what the stick is because they were blind. Who knows? Okay, but that's the whole concept of not knowing. An architect doesn't really know, but they do their best to guess. So the architects and the Motel of Mysteries got some of the stuff right, but some of the stuff wrong. Okay, and that's kind of what an architect does, is they make really educated guesses based on the place that the artifacts were found and the condition they were found in. Okay, so clearly, given just the historical account, you guys were probably way off on your Motel of Mysteries. But did you make some decent guesses? Did you draw the sarcophagus a lot like a bathtub? Did you draw the soap a lot like soap? So check your answers, see how you did. I'll give you a second, pause it, and go. All right. Okay, let's talk about today's work. Obviously, you're watching the video, so you found this. The notes you need are in Google Classroom. So make sure you either print those out or take the notes digitally as you go. You are not handing them in today, but they are pretty heavily represented on the test. So make sure you take these notes and you have them handy. Okay. Part of the way through the notes, there's going to be a cool video that's like 7 minutes long. I'm not going to show the video here, but you should check it out. It's a guy that's just using 2 rocks and he's banging them together and he's creating tools. And this is exactly what they did in the Paleolithic area before we had any type of sophisticated weaponry, is they just banged rocks together and found ways to use what happened when you did that. We'll come across that again when we do the notes. Right now, let's do those notes. So get those notes out, and let's talk about the Paleolithic era, okay? So we're going to make it, this is all of really the Stone Age. The Paleolithic means old stone. So we're talking the Stone Age. The modern Stone Age family, like the Flintstones. So take a second in your notes and answer these questions. I'll let you pause it. What do you think this is and these are? What do you think some possible uses for them might be? And as a result of knowing that these were tools, what type of activities were they using these for? And do you think these were hunters or farmers using these tools? I'm going to give you a second to go ahead and pause that. Answer those questions in your notes. Go. All right, here we go. Come on, work. There we go. All right, so what you saw back here, this is actually called a scraper, and it's used to scrape the sinew and the meat away from the skin of the animal because they want that skin to be as clean as possible because they're going to use it for clothing. These are augers or arrowheads. It depends on how big they are. But this is a hand axe scraper. Could be one of the two. This is how they're going to make it. We're going to show you a video on that in a little bit. But let's talk about the Paleolithic era. Paleolithic means Old Stone Age. It's the earliest time that mankind existed. So the Earth is a lot older. We saw that in the video. The Earth is a lot older than mankind. Mankind, as we know it today, started in what we call the Paleolithic Age. And it's called the Stone Age because that's what they made the tools out of. So we are now in the Steel Age because most of our tools are made out of steel. There's a lot of historians that suggest we actually should rename it the Plastic Age because we have way more stuff made out of plastic nowadays than steel. But the real tools we use to create, not in the kitchen, but like to create, cars and stuff like that, they're made out of steel. So realistically speaking, we are now in the Steel Age. This is the Stone Age. They're making all of their tools out of stone because that's the best that they have. People always make their tools and weapons out of the best that they can actually use. So they are not sophisticated enough to use metals yet. They're using stone. So the people are making tools and weapons out of stone. One of the biggest problems with this is finding a usable stone. So the people in this time were obsessed with gathering, hoarding stones that were usable for a lot of different things. This is between 250,000 and 10,000 years ago. So this is the vast majority of human existence is the Stone Age, the Old Stone Age. Rather, there's going to be a new Stone Age called a Neolithic Age. So the Old Stone Age is about 250,000 to 10,000 years ago. When we hit 10,000 years ago, we're going to hit the New Stone Age, and that doesn't mean we're going to stop using stones. It's just the New Stone Age, but our stone usage is going to get way better, and we're going to go undergo a major change. So this 240,000 years, we're pretty stagnant as far as technological advancement. The earliest stones appear about stone tools appear 2.6 million years ago, but they're really crude. They're flakes and hammer stones, and we're going to show you a video of how those work in just a minute here. 1.76 million years ago, hand axes and large cutting tools appeared. This is a hand axe. And you can, if you look at it, it's about the size of a hand, and it's used to chop. And an axe is a chopping tool. Most axes we have nowadays have a handle because we can work metals and we can make a large, more usable metal axe. But this would be used for the same thing you would use an axe for nowadays, to cut wood, to chop through things. And imagine how hard it would be to chop through a tree with one of these. That's kind of what we're dealing with back in the Old Stone Age. So about 200,000 years ago, we started advancing quickly away from stone hand axes and started doing more advanced things like spear points, arrowheads, fish hooks. I know it's hard to imagine fishing with some stone, but they did it. And they were able to start attaching wood to some of those tools. And that actually makes it so we can hunt larger animals and our food source becomes more reliable. It also makes it for us to be able to cut down larger trees and make better shelters. Perforators are something you punch through leather. Remember, they're going to take that animal hide, they're going to clean it off, they're going to tan it or age it, and then they're going to sew it. And so before you could have a perforator and you could punch through that leather, you would have to kind of just take whatever skin it was and drape it over you. Once you have a perforator, you can actually custom make the clothing to you, and it becomes much more warmer, and you're capable of moving around a lot better. And all is something you can dig into things with. So here's that video I talked about. I posted it back here on the Week 2 materials. It's really, really cool. It's a guy who's a specialist in, he's an archaeologist. He's a specialist in old Stone Age stuff, and he's going to take that piece of rock and he's going to turn it into not only a hand axe, but all the little chips he pulls off there are going to be little things he can use for tools. So take about 7 minutes and watch that, and you're going to see him turn a large rock into a bunch of usable parts. All right, so during the Old Stone Age, we were hunters and gatherers. Hunters and gatherers both count as foragers, and what that means is they're going to harvest nature's bounty. They are not going to plant. They are not in any way, shape, or form going to create food. They are going to take what they can find, and that's what a forager does. If you're going to think of a forager as somebody who's walking along and finds a use for what they found, they are not creating food. Okay, so foragers hunt and gather. Hunting means obviously going out, finding an animal to kill, killing it, and harvesting the meat. Gathering is, imagine you taking a really big basket and walking around in the woods and finding nuts and berries and anything that has nutrition that you can eat. Okay, so you got to figure these people were pretty good at knowing what food was edible and what food was poisonous. How do you find out if a food is poisonous? You eat it and then hope you don't get sick or die. So over time, these guys have learned all the poisonous stuff and how to handle a lot of this food, but they're not able to refrigerate meat. So if they kill an animal, they got to eat it quick. There's not a lot of ways to preserve it. We don't have a lot of evidence from these early human beings. We've got things like spearheads and arrowheads. We find bowls or baskets, some type of rudimentary way to gather. They weren't writing down any type of records. We have nothing solid to go on except when we find 1,000 arrowheads, we can start putting together what kind of technology they might have had, that kind of thing. They lived in really small groups because they had to feed, they had to eat. And the larger the group, the more food you needed, and they didn't have more food. They couldn't create food. So they were stuck with what they could find, and it wasn't an abundance of food. So they lived in groups of 20 to 30 people because more mouths meant more food, and they didn't have it. So smaller groups of people were easier to feed. A typical group would be 25 to 30 people, 10 of which were hunters, 10 of which were gatherers, and 5 of which were usually children. They also could move from place to place faster when what little food they had would run out, or a lot of times they were herding, which means they were following a specific group of animals, and those animals would move. So they needed to be mobile. They did not put down permanent housing. They did not live in anything that was buried into the ground that could withstand weather. They lived in permanent homes that could be packed up and moved. The most advanced version of that in America is a teepee. But teepees are incredibly advanced. If you've ever seen one created or moved, they're really, really cool. These guys didn't have that. They were living in lean-tos, which are just 2 pieces of stick with some hides between them that they could lean up against a tree. If they could find a cave, that was awesome, which is why they're often called cavemen. But caves were really hard to find. So they would use mammoth bones, they would use hides, and they would make really rudimentary shelters that could not stand up against the weather. We're going to have to stop there for today, and we'll finish this on Monday. I hope you guys have a great weekend. Take that quiz, watch that video, fill out that Motel of Mysteries, and email if you have any questions. Have a great weekend, folks.